And later on, I learned, that because of his immigrant background, he identified with the dispossessed people. So when they went west, he would empathize naturally with the Mexicans who were being thrown off their land by American farmers and so on. And so gradually, another version of Billy began to emerge. Not the pathological killer, not the cold-blooded killer, not the the typical outlaw profile. Not at all. Something completely different.
Hey, now, friend. Can I get you something?
Not yet. Hey, it's Jim Alexander at Real Talker. How's it going, fellas?
Very good, Jim. Nice to meet you.
Great. Nice to meet you too. Michael, you got these kind of like spotlights coming down on you. I feel like you're in somewhere really important.
I am. I'm in MGM office.
Okay, well, good to know. It's very mysterious and cool.
Good. I like that. I like to be mysterious and cool, but I always fail. So,
well, today we're giving you that honor. Okay. No one's taking it away. I had so many questions about this. When you guys got together to talk about Billy the Kid, there's been so many versions of this, of movies and books and everything over the years. What were the kind of initial discussions of making it different and kind of like the way you did it? Because I feel like every version's got its own thing about it too. There's no, just like Billy the Kid, there's no one version, right, of that story. But what was your kind of main thing you guys wanted to accomplish? In a sense, do it your way. What was that thing initially?
Well, really, it's about my process that begins in research. So I didn't look at other portrayals of Billy. I wasn't particularly interested in that. I wanted to do my own research. And I'd idolized Billy since I'd been a kid myself, even though I grew up in the north of England. But I wanted to know if he was worth idolizing. I wanted to drill down and to try and find out who he really was, where he came from, what sort of world he lived in, what were, all the things about, as much as I could find out. And so I read as much as I could find. And I preferred to read things by people who'd known him, who wrote accounts of, there are a number of accounts by people who rode with him. And out of this research began to emerge a picture of a young man totally different from all the cliches I'd ever thought of about Billy. Here's a young man who's an immigrant, or certainly the son of Irish immigrants, who is deeply, who loves his mother, who's deeply affected by his mother, who's a devout Catholic, and gives him a moral compass. He's very, very sensitive young man. He's talented in his own ways. He's beautiful voice. He sings, and later on, I learned, that because of his immigrant background, he identified with the dispossessed people. So when they went west, he would empathize naturally with the Mexicans who were being thrown off their land by American farmers and so on. And so gradually, another version of Billy began to emerge. Not the pathological killer, not the cold-blooded killer, not the the typical outlaw profile. Not at all. Something completely different. So that meant that I was always going to tell a slightly different story, but I hoped that, and I still hope, that it's more authentic than any other previous portrayal, because I'm not doing it for effect. I mean, and then talking to the director, Otto Bathurst, our first director, and he was doing research, and we both came upon this idea that what we were doing was a pre-Western, not a Western, not a traditional Western, because when Billy and his family first went west, they went to Coffeyville in Kansas, they were promised jobs and opportunities as immigrants, but Coffeyville had only been founded 3 years before. It was a building site. There were no jobs, no opportunities. It was a lie. The Americans just wanted presence there in the Midwest, so in their effort to grab the land from the Mexicans and so on, and so on. So Billy identifying with the Mexicans, learning to speak Spanish, having a Mexican girlfriend and so on. All these things were new, and we were offered, obviously, when we were shooting in Calgary, there are these ready-made Western towns, which you've seen in every movie and every Western that's ever been made. And Otto went to see them and said, I don't want to use these because I recognize them. And when Billy came west, they didn't exist. It was far more rudimentary, far more rough and ready, far more primitive. And we want to show that because the railroad hadn't even arrived in Kansas at that time. So that's another way in which we were going to do right from the start something different, a different kind of Western.
Donald, I mean, you've produced a ton of movies that I've seen and a lot of different genres. What about, in a sense, this character that appealed to you as sort of a creative, in your own right, that searches for stories and characters? And what about Michael, in particular, knowing his work from Tudors and Vikings, his style of knowing how to, in a sense, how to do a period movie, in a sense, too, that made you want that connection to know that this is the guy for you to work on this project and on this character, in a sense?
Yeah, well, I was already a big fan of Michael's work, and knew that he was always came from character and was very rich in his research process, and that he had a take on this character that no one has seen before, and really went in, starting obviously with the childhood, to see all these forces that shaped Billy into this complicated, kind of contradictory iconic character that he became. So I was very fascinated by that, because it wasn't just a one-sided portrait of an icon at all. It had depth to it and complexity to it. And that's the way Michael was going to create it, and the way he saw it, and we'll see it all the way through, in fact. And it's one of the things that makes the show never boring. You're seeing Billy undergo these internal struggles, and he is always being pulled by the light and the dark sides, like we always are. I think every human being goes through that. And there were, brutal realities that he had to face, and he needed to survive in the Old West. And it was not easy. And as a child, he became the man of the house at a very young age, and saw his mother getting beaten down, and needed to do what he could to really step up and try to help them survive. So it just, it's a really interesting character, and he was always being pulled. He had this desire to go straight and be legitimate. His mother had instilled those values in him so deeply, and yet, once he put one foot in, he really couldn't get out. It tormented him, and we'll watch him kind of go through that struggle in this show.
I love your kind of take, both of you, the way you talk about Billy. It's more about the person, the origin story of him, not what we know about him as the gunslinger, kind of the wild, wild West guy. But both of you have really put on a focus about the origins, what made him be what he is, in a sense, and that's really cool about that. I know we have running out of time, but quickly, you guys have 8 episodes in. Do you have more story of this to continue for future seasons? Because I think 8, there's more to this than 8 episodes. What do you guys kind of have a plan outlook for long term?
Well, the episode 8 of the last episode of the first season, Billy reaches Lincoln County, and Billy is famous as much as anything else for his involvement in the Lincoln County War, and in which he did extraordinary things. And so the second season of 8, hopefully we're going to move on to that, will be set in the Lincoln County Wars, and then there'll be a third season of 8 about what happened afterwards, and that gives me plenty of opportunity to continue to tell, you're quite right, the human story, not the icon, the human being. And I've enjoyed this so much, and it's such a good production that I just wanted to go on.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys. Great job, and can't wait for more.
Thank you, Jim.